Good morning. Good morning. I am live here. It is Sunday morning, but whenever you're watching this, I hope you're having a great time. So, how do we heal from a relationship? There are two choices. You can hold on to the relationship or you can let it go. And letting go is, for many people, obviously the better option, but it's not always the easiest option. So, how do you let someone go? And I'm going to tell you that with my ex husband, I did not let him go. I held on to him for a good 10 years, being self righteous, blaming him, and really living in a shame spiral that I was projecting upon the idea of him and what he did, because he did some pretty bad things at the end of our relationship. And it was hard. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, that situation was incredibly hard, but it's what I made it mean about me that was so damaging, because I made it mean that I was unworthy of love. I made it mean that if this man who I loved more than life itself could leave me, that I must be not only unworthy of love, but completely unlovable. And now I had evidence. So, what I want to tell you, what I want to share with you is what I discovered. Because here's the big thing is that life is hard. Yeah, I'm having a bad hair moment. So, forgive me as I'm fixing this. Life is hard, you know. Hello, Captain Obvious, right? But it's what we make everything mean that makes it either easier or harder. And one thing that I knew was when I fast forwarded and years later I was in another relationship and I was engaged to be married and I was living with my now ex and his children, that when we broke up, I did not want to repeat the same mistake that I made when my marriage broke up, because I did not want to hold on to the hate. I did not want to hold on to the anger. I did not want my life to be dictated by the end of this relationship. And looking back on my life and looking back specifically on the time of my life after my divorce, what I want to say is that divorce is hard, but what we make it mean makes it even harder. Okay. And the way we respond to our ex in the situation makes everything harder. And how do you make it easier? Well, I truly believe there are nuggets of grace that are left for us to discover. And the hardest things in our lives are actually some of the greatest opportunities for growth, because I've been working in fitness now for 35 years, and there is never a change without a challenge, which means that your body, your muscles, your nervous system won't respond unless there's a really hard challenge. So when I look at the challenge of my divorce, I could not have changed. I could not have grown without the challenges that I was being asked to take on after my divorce. And quite honestly, I did not take them on well. I suffered for 10 years. And I went out there trying to date after my divorce because I really believed that I needed someone to reflect back to me that I was worthy of love. And what I was doing was I was becoming a chameleon. So if I was out there dating, I tried to anticipate what he needed me to be so he wouldn't leave. And I never got to be seen. I never got to be heard. I never got to be known because I wasn't speaking my truth. And so what I had to learn was that if I am not respecting myself, if I'm allowing this other human being to dictate everything about our relationship, and I'm just responding, then I'm showing him that I'm not making myself a priority. So why the heck would he make me a priority. And what I came to understand was that I teach the world how to treat me, but I had to find it inside of me. And the way I found it was on the pages of a journal. Quite honestly, quite simply, I use a simple notebook, and right now it's back to school season. You can buy these, for less than $1 a piece. And my favorite blue crystal Bic pen. I buy these in bulk because I love them. There's something about it that it helps me write. And during my divorce, I sat down and I wrote 2 words because I was struggling and suffering and I was being brought to my knees. I was in so much pain. And oh, by the way, in the middle of my divorce, my mom died very suddenly and unexpectedly. And then 2 weeks after my mom died, my dog died. I mean, I literally was looking at God like, have you lost my dance card, God? Because here I am and I have all of this heartbreak going on. My grandmother found a lump in her breast the night before my mom died, her daughter. So we had so much on our plate, and I'm dealing with my ex husband who is losing his mind. And I don't mean that figuratively, I mean that literally, that he was suffering from a severe mental illness that was undiagnosed, and he was acting accordingly in our marriage and doing things that were not honoring the marriage, like having multiple affairs. I had been the person who was working and supporting our household, and I gave him credit cards that were actually mine. I put his name on it, and he was taking women out on dates on my credit cards. And he took a credit card and he put $6,000 down on a new car without asking me. And I had to find all of this out. He was sending women flowers, which he was buying with my credit card. He was taking women out on dates with my credit cards. Oh, and when I discovered that he was telling all of our friends that we were getting a divorce, but he didn't tell me, and he was doing that to cover up his infidelity, and I confronted him about this because I should have confronted him about this, he threw me up against a wall and he choked me. So needless to say I was dealing with way too much stress, and I went into a dark hole for the next decade is understandable, but I could have gotten out of it faster. But during this time, I started to journal. And at first, I was journaling and I was writing, Dear God, and I was asking for God to heal my now ex husband so he could come back and we could get back together, because it was all I actually really wanted, even after everything that happened, because I didn't know who I was. Am I proud of that? No. Is it the truth? Yes. Have I taken a lot of time to heal from it? Yes. And it wasn't until 10 years later that I stopped telling God what I wanted. Let this man fall in love with me. What do I have to do to make this man fall in love with me when I was out there dating? Why can't anybody stay? Like, why am I suffering so much? It wasn't until I learned to write, Dear God, ask for help, and then shut up and listen for guidance. Instead of making demands, instead of telling God what I wanted, asking for guidance, and then becoming quiet and still long enough that I could start to hear the answers. And I remember in 2010, the first time I really received a message of true grace and love. And I was dating a man, and it wasn't an intense relationship. I really liked him. He's a good human being, just not a great boyfriend. And we would be talking and he'd say, "Oh, I have to go. I'll call you tomorrow." And then I wouldn't hear from him for 3 days. But when he would call, then I was jumping and I was like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" Like, you said you'd call tomorrow and you didn't call. And I was feeling hurt And I was also starting to realize that I was acting like a trained puppy, that when he would reach out and invite me to something fabulous, because he invited me to some fabulous events, that I was just jumping up and being, the good girlfriend, and, being polite and kind and quiet and sweet. And I was pissed. I'm going to tell you the truth. I was pissed. I was hurt. You say you're going to call and then you disappear. And here I am. And on the pages of my journal, I started asking questions like, what do I do? And I simply heard, sorry about the train in the background. I simply heard, you can say no, thank you. And the thought came in so peacefully. And I'm putting my hand here because this is my right side of my body. I realized when I'm connecting to source or to my higher self, it comes in on the right side. If I'm hearing from souls that crossed over, like my mom or other people, which I've learned that I can hear, they come in on my left side. So that's why I'm distinguishing how I received that message. Because as I was journaling, I heard that I could say no, thank you. And so the next time he reached out and he invited me to something fabulous, something that I really would have loved to have gone to, but I didn't want to just be a doormat anymore. That I said, no, comma, thank you. And that was it. There was no anger. There was no bitterness. It was just me figuring out what I needed and saying that, this doesn't work for me anymore. No song, no dance, no making him wrong. He's not a bad human being. He's just doing his best. And by the way, I think I trained him that that was okay. And then I started asking my higher power. You can call it God, you can call it universe, you can call it source. If you have a problem with calling it God, you can call it Gus, which is God, universe, source. It's the abbreviation, or even dog, which is God spelled backwards. I don't think that's a mistake. When we have these nagging questions, we can go to ourselves and find the answers. We do not need to be out here scrolling on social media, asking other people for the advice, because what happened to me in my experience might not help you. But what I want to do is help you be able to discover the answer to the question. So when I started to sit with my journal at this time, and I asked, why do I do this? Why do I behave this way? I got to see that, I have a wonderful dad. And my dad would leave for periods of time as a kid. And he'd be working long hours to support his growing family, but he always came back. And I had that expectation on loving relationships that they'll always come back and it's good. Like I'm safe. But I wasn't actually taking each individual situation and seeing it for what it was. That my expectation of love and safety from my childhood, which wasn't a bad thing. My parents were happily married until my mom died after 38 years of marriage. It doesn't mean they didn't have hard times. It just means they worked through it. But I had taken that safety, that expectation that people just always come back, and I was translating that into my modern adult perspective. And I didn't have to do that any longer. I could take time and use what I learned from Brene Brown in one of her books, that, trust is like a marble jar. And I could literally be filling a marble jar with marbles, or in my case, crystals, because I like crystals. So that's what I use. That I could use a marble jar. And as they were earning points, building trust, I could add marbles to it. But then when they did things that didn't let me feel safe in the relationship, even though I might be asking for it, I could take marbles out and I could have a physical representation of when you really start to trust this person. Forgive me, I have an itch. Wow, that wasn't going to go away. So I learned starting in about 2010, even after journaling for 10 years, that when I asked questions and I got quiet enough that I could hear the answers. And the answers that work for me may not be the answers that work for you. And that's okay because you can find these answers too. And it is so simple. You get a, I like to write with my hand. The hand has a neurological connection to the brain and to the emotional state. And I sit in a quiet place. I've gotten the habit of doing this early in the morning. You know, when I was with my ex and we had his children in our lives, there was a lot to do in the evening. And then we would sit and watch TV, and my ex would always fall asleep. And I'm like, we're not getting any quality time. So I learned to start going to bed early so I could wake up early before everybody else woke up. So I could begin to take time for myself, whether it was journaling, whether I am a published author, whether it was taking time to actually write, whether it was taking time to work out. It was my time to take care of me. And so here we are. I mean, it's now 2006, so I've been doing this since 2016, which so it's at least 2016 because I came up with a lot of this before that. So it had to be about 2014 I started doing this. I could sit in this quiet time, but when I didn't have time to do it, I could do it on my lunch break at work, or I could do it before I fell asleep at night. You just have to find a time that works for you. You also don't need a lot of time, but as you practice it more and more, you might want more time. So I would sit with my journal and I would date it in the upper right hand corner. And then I would write two words. I'd write, Dear God. You can write, Dear Source. You can write, Dear Universe. And I learned that I heard more guidance from my higher self, from source energy, when I started with a moment of gratitude. Because what gratitude does is it elevates your energy and you connect to source energy better. And so I would simply write, Good morning, Lord. Thank you for today. And then I'd write, Thank you for something I really was appreciative of. Thank you for my dog. Thank you for this wonderful cup of coffee if the weather was bad outside. Thank you that I am in a warm, safe home. And really hold that feeling of gratitude for that moment. Thank you for connecting with me. Thank you for the insights I'm ready to receive. And then I learned to protect myself. So I would write, I am listening for the good of all, the harm of none, and for my highest good. And those three things are really important because when information comes in from source and you can channel your highest self, you can channel God's source, love, and energy. It really needs to fit those three criteria because if it's not for the good of all, the harm of none, and for my highest good, it is not from the light. Because the light will never tell you something nasty. They'll tell you the truth, but it'll come in soft. It's never urgent. It is just a loving, intuitive message that when I would get the message, it would always feel like, number one, it was a version of Jo Ellen that was way smarter than this very flawed, very human version of Jo Ellen. And it was soft. And it always felt like, of course, that's the answer. Thank you. Why didn't I think of that myself? Because when you receive inspiration from source energy, it's soft. And that's the only way I can describe it. And it's like an aha, but it's a gentle aha. There's nothing to prove. There's nothing to do. It is never spiteful. it is always based in love, and it is always the perfect answer for the situation. And the other thing I started to realize is when I had to ask for the help that I needed and then become quiet enough to listen for the answer. Because if I don't ask for help, they can't help me. Angels, guides, teachers, God, Jesus, they actually can't help you unless you've asked for help, because we come into this lifetime to be independent, sovereign beings. We also come into this lifetime to forget that we are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe, and you have forgotten because you came into this lifetime, into this body to forget. I mean, just imagine if you had access to this information all the time, you wouldn't appreciate it. So you come into this lifetime, into this body to forget, because when you remember how loved you are, it is the greatest gift you ever will receive. And no matter what, no one can ever take it away from you. The other thing I really realized is that, now I've been journaling since 2000, more or less, but since 2010 for the last 16 years with a more openness, so I could hear the loving messages from above and I wasn't making demands on God or source energy. And when I would read Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch, or Friendship with God with Neale Donald Walsch, or what I am in the last few days of studying, because I'm on day 362 of 365 days of A Course in Miracles. When I read A Course in Miracles, people say it reads like stereotext and it's hard to understand. But it wasn't hard for me to understand, because what I had been uncovering was that on the pages of my journal, I was getting the same answers. That it's always about love, that it's always about forgiveness, that the person across from me was here to teach me a beautiful lesson that is actually a blessing in disguise, and that we are all connected. Not only are we all connected, but that we are all worthy of love, and we've forgotten. And God loves us unconditionally. God loves us unconditionally. And we forget and make mistakes, and that never changes how much we are loved. And when I was journaling this morning, this is the story that I heard, and they said, share it. So, yes, I tried to fix my hair. Did it work out? No. Yes, did I put on a touch of makeup? Yeah, but not a lot. And then I turned on my camera and I started filming, because I wanted to deliver this message, because it was so pure and full of intent. But you don't have to take my word for it, because honestly, I can't tell you what to do. My sole mission in this lifetime is to help you understand that you are worthy of love. But as many times as I say that to you, you're probably never going to believe me if you have the experience that that's not true, that you've created the belief. But you can start to tap into your highest source energy and understand that you're worthy of love. And when I was breaking up with my now ex-fiance in 2019, I knew weeks before it happened that it was going to happen. I wanted it to work out. I was working toward that, but it takes two people to do that. And when I would get angry at him, because I had rights to be angry because I'm a human being, I would get present to the feeling, and I would say, I'd start ruminating and I'd say, no, stop. I'd take a deep breath and I'd say, God, you take him. I know you love him and I can't carry him any longer. Take good care of him. And immediately my brain would start ruminating on something he had done or said that was so hurtful or attempting to hurt me. And I would go, nope, stop, take a deep breath. And I would say, God, you take him. I know you love him and I can't carry him any longer. Take good care of him. And I learned that in my journal to send him love and send him back to God, to let go of the anger, to see that all of this was part of a divine plan. And we were not together during the pandemic, which I am so grateful for. I received the most beautiful, loving messages of grace through my journal. And at this point, sometimes I sit and I'm just channeling from light and I'm writing and writing and writing. And I'm going to start posting those. I'm going to start posting them on Substack because what I'm hearing in my journaling are the most beautiful, loving messages of grace. And you can do this too. And you can borrow my examples in the beginning until you learn that this is your gift. You've just forgotten that you can connect to source energy. You can connect to God. God is waiting to tell you how much God loves you. And if you don't like the word God, again, call it universe, call it source. God doesn't even care what you call God. God just loves you no matter what. God's just waiting on you to ask so we can share all this information. And by the way, he is just because I've spent my entire life raised in a religion that called God him. God doesn't have an identity. God is just God. God is the term we give the blanket that we can lay over everything so we can see it. But the name isn't important. The love is the message. And we came here to forget. Journaling is how I remembered. And you can do it too. Please let me know how that helped you. And remember, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You've simply forgotten. Remembering is the gift.